Good afternoon, church. I'm glad to come to you today with Everyday Faith, and we're so excited to be able to come to you each day as the pastoral staff and be able to share with you just some thoughts that are on our hearts, on our minds. And so today I hope that this will be an encouragement to you and a help to you. I actually had this thought about a year ago, and I wore this shirt that I have on purpose. This shirt is the logo for our student ministry and has been the logo for our student ministry for the past year. And oftentimes I get asked what this logo means. And so I put it up on a screen here just again to be able to give you a bigger picture of what that is. And that logo stands for God is greater than our highs and our lows. And last year when we put that out, we produced t-shirts like this for our student ministry. Obviously, we have no idea what God has in store for us over this next year, but it has been exciting to see that no matter what has been going on in our lives of our students, that whether it's good or whether it's bad, God is greater than anything that we could possibly have come across our lives. So with our students, it was teaching them that in the good times, God is greater than the good, and in the bad times, God is greater than the bad things that go on. And as I was thinking about this shirt, this logo, it caused me to go back to a thought that I had a while ago with a verse in Genesis, and we'll get there in a second. But it reminded me of the story of Joseph. And in Genesis chapter number 39, we see that Joseph is sold into the hands of some people that were going to Egypt. And Joseph was taken down to Egypt. And there, as you know this story, he was sold to Potiphar. And in Potiphar's house, he had good character, and he did what was right, and he was promoted. And as he was promoted, he had more people underneath him, and he was responsible for more. But then we also see there that in chapter 40 of Genesis, that Joseph was put into prison. He was lied about, and as a result of that lie, he was sent to prison and spent a number of years there in the dungeon. And Joseph had no idea what was going on, why it was happening. I can't imagine your brother selling you, and then you get to Egypt and things look better, and you think, man, this is going to be great. But then in Egypt, things fall apart, and you get thrown in jail. And Joseph spent some time in prison, and there in prison, he again kept his character and kept his knowledge that God was in control. And so he lived that way in the dungeon. He lived that way in Potiphar's house. He lived that way at home. And Joseph's life is just an encouragement to us. But in chapter number 40, there were two men that were in brought into Joseph's life. One was a baker, and the other one was the butler. And they came to Joseph, and they told Joseph about a dream that each of them had had. And Joseph interpreted those dreams for them. And as we read the story in Genesis chapter 40, the butler comes to Joseph and tells him what's going on, and Joseph interprets it and says, hey, you're going to be restored back to the king's palace. And so the baker came, and he's like, hey, let me tell you what the dream that I had, and hoping that it was going to be something good like that as well. And Joseph told him, man, you're going to end up being killed. And sure enough, a few days later, this all happened, and the butler was restored and the baker was killed. And Joseph told the butler, hey, remember me when you get up there. And we see in Genesis chapter 41 that it says that it was 2 full years that Joseph sat there wondering what was going on. Joseph was thinking about all of the promises that were made, that, yeah, when I get back, I'll remember you. And for 2 years, nothing. And there's a really interesting verse, and I'm going to read the verse to you. In Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, this kind of describes Joseph's ideas and philosophy for his whole life, the good things and the bad things. In verse number 20, it says, as for you, you thought it evil against me, but God meant it unto good to bring to pass as it is this day to save much people alive. And there's two words there that I want you to see, but God. And so I put them on the screen here, but God, because I think that especially in times that we don't understand what's going on, we wonder, is God in control? And so we see things like what's going on today, and we have good times in our life, and we have bad times in our life. We have things that we struggle with, and oftentimes we wonder, does God remember? And so I want to challenge you today to remember that but God is something that is valuable for us to remember, that in the good times, God is still there. In the bad times, but God is still there, and he is working. And it took me to a verse in Philippians chapter number 4. I've got that on the screen here as well. And it says, rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. Philippians 4:4. And so that tells us that we are supposed to rejoice always. Now, how do we do that? How do we rejoice when things are difficult? How do we rejoice when things, and keep our eyes on Christ when things are good? And it seems like in these few weeks that we have come around to the point where sometimes things aren't so good, and it seems a whole lot easier to focus on our problems and our difficulties rather than focus on Christ. And so today I just want to challenge you to focus on Christ. Ephesians chapter 1, verse 11, it says, in whom we have obtained an inheritance, being predestinated according to the purpose of him who worketh all things after the counsel of his own will. That phrase, worketh all things, it gives us a challenge to see a higher purpose in the difficulties that we face. And oftentimes, right now especially, we are focused on the difficulties, and things have changed in our life. Right now, we are restricted to our homes and only necessary places to go. And so it's really easy to see and just focus on the little bubble around us. But we have a greater calling, and that is to see that God's plan is being worked out even though we don't understand it. God's plan is being worked out, and he is not just focused on the thing that we're going through right now. Just like Joseph, if Joseph would have been focused on the fact that he was being sold by his brothers, and that's all he dwelt on, he would have become bitter. If Joseph would have focused on the fact that even though all of these circumstances have happened in his life, but he still rose to power, he would have become prideful. But Joseph did not focus on that. Joseph focused on but God. And in the times that we can focus on just but God, it doesn't matter if it's good times, it doesn't matter if it's bad times. Every moment, everything that goes on, if we remember, but God is working his plan according to his will. It will help us to stay focused on the fact that the things we're going through right now, good or bad, are because God is working out his plan. And when we begin to focus on God's plan, it helps us to be able to see that God is doing something greater than what I can see. And so it helps me to be on the lookout to say, all right, God, what are you doing today in my life? And what can you use me to do in the circumstances that I'm going through to fulfill your plan? I know God's greater than I am. God's greater than my plans and my working. But I also know that God wants me to be a part of what he is doing. And so today, we have a choice. God is greater than our highs and our lows. God is greater than the things we're going through. God is writing a grander story than just what we see. And so today, I just want to challenge you. No matter what it is, ask God, what are you trying to do through me today? What are you using me to do? How can I reach out to my neighbors and my friends and family and those that I come across at the grocery store and those that I come across at the gas station and those that I see at the doctor's office or wherever we are, good or bad? What is God doing with you today? So I pray that you'll just remember, but God today. But God. Things may seem bad, but God is in the middle of it. Things may seem really good, but God is in the middle of it, trying to make something in your life that is profitable for His purpose. And if we just remember that, we'll constantly be looking for the but God moments that come our way. I pray that you have a blessed day, and that we can see each other again soon. Take care, church.